look to the future. Don't look to the past. Look to see how we're going to be able to improve education as we move forward. We have a unique opportunity to just blow up the way that the system has been working and build and create a new system that is best for all students.
Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this edition of Future Ready's Leading Through Unprecedented Times. With me today, so excited to have Superintendent from South Carolina, Dr. Baron Davis here. Baron, it is awesome to have you here today. Take a moment, if you would, for our audience and just introduce yourself.
Hey, hello to everyone. My name is Baron Davis, and I serve as Superintendent of Richland School District 2. It's located in Columbia, South Carolina, actually in the northeast section of the city of Columbia. We have roughly 28,500 students in our school district. And I'm wrapping up my third full year as superintendent in Richland 2.
Well, it is great to have you here today. Admire your work, see what you're putting out there online, and the work, and just your heart radiates in all you do. So excited for this conversation here. Let's take a moment, if we could, and just reflect on this past school year. You know, we all know the pandemic that's out there. We all know the chaos that ensued. We all know teachers truly were asked to redo things overnight, shift things. Your principals, yourself, you've completely had to shift gears. Talk to us about some reflections about what were some lessons learned. What are some things that really came out to the radar that just really became priorities, and just reflect on that for a few minutes, if you would.
Yeah, there are a couple of reflections, a couple of things that came out of this whole issue with the pandemic, and the need to be able to have organizational, for your organization to be able to pivot. And so making sure the organization is in a position to be flexible enough to do so should something like that occur. So one of the things that we've taken from this position is that we're not positioning ourselves to return back to normal. We have to position ourselves to move forward, right? So I feel like sometimes we're bracing, like, let's just get through this so we can get back to how it was, and that can't be our focus. As I reflect on that, we have to start thinking about how we're going to move forward. So 2020 was supposed to be about a time of vision and clarity. But you add 20 to 20, you get 40, and 40 is the number of preparations. So now that we have some vision and clarity from this pause, now it's time to prepare for the next step. We talked about having grace and guts in getting through this pandemic and some of the challenges that comes along with it. And so it's important that we have, grit. It's important that we have grit to get through it, and also that we extend grace and all of us should be covered by the grace that we give one another as we work on some of these challenges. And that's been very beneficial because it's allowed the teachers and the administrators to kind of slow down a little bit and the parents and everyone understand that we're all working through this together, and it's not going to be perfect, but we can figure out anything that we need to figure out in order to make this a good experience for our students.
Yeah,
as best as we can, I should say.
Absolutely. And such a great mindset there. You know, one of the things that we've seen in the news, seen in some newspapers, some concerns from parents, is the idea around learning loss. And, you know, some people looking at it, hey, we always have this summer slide. Is it going to be even larger? Are those gaps going to increase, especially for, you know, for some of our marginalized groups or special needs populations? What are you doing there in Richland too, just to really focus on some of those gaps around this idea around learning loss? How you handling that? How you processing it? What are you looking at in that regard?
So one of the things that we did, we quickly deployed devices. We're a one-to-one school district, but our elementary students didn't take their devices home. So we quickly deployed our devices down to second grade. So every student from 2nd to 12th grade has a device. We're allowing those students to keep their devices with them all summer. With the exception of those students who may be transitioning out from because they graduated, or they're going to another school district. Our teachers have been teaching and using one-to-one platforms since about 1999, 2000. So we've had some capacity to be able to do that. We put some professional development in place to help our teachers understand the pedagogical difference between teaching online virtually versus teaching brick and mortar in the classroom. We also assigned set times that our teachers were scheduled to meet with our students throughout this whole process, this whole time period. And so they've been having ongoing classroom sessions We've reduced the amount of time that students, particularly the younger students, were required to be online, but we've also made sure that we were keeping up with their work and assessing them as we were moving forward. So we had a unique, I guess, position to really be able to pivot very quickly to really establish a virtual platform. We even have a virtual school offerings, virtual classrooms offerings in our school district, Richland 2 virtual schools. And so many of our high school students were already accustomed to taking classes virtually as well. And so now the challenge is focusing on those earlier grades, K through 3, making sure that we had an opportunity to assess those students, and we'll be doing that this summer, along with with summer reading and mathematics camps, particularly focusing on those students who have a higher need for academic support.
Yeah, well, I'm a dad of a kindergartner, and I can tell you, if I'm not sitting right next to that guy, it is chaos. And so we are ready to get some, additional support and sending them back there. No, in all seriousness, those younger grades certainly have some more challenges with that. My daughter, being older, is a lot more independent. She can go, she can roll, and focusing on those ages and say, what does it look like for a kindergartner? What does it look like for a first grader? Certainly, such vital conversations. So let me ask you this: states are really all over the map. As we record this here, there's still so many uncertainties. There's still few guidelines as we look towards next year. What are some of the things as a superintendent of a good sized district that are really on your radar that you're going to have to grapple with for this coming year that's just different from the average year? What are those pieces that you're looking at for next year? Some of those big pictures.
Definitely teacher professional development has to be critical this year, I think, in the upcoming school year. I don't think this is the last time we're going to deal with something of this magnitude. And so it would be a shame that if something happens, particularly if we have another strand of COVID-19 or a COVID-20 or something like that, and we have to go back to a point where we're delivering work virtually, we should be in a better position the next time than we are this time. So making sure our teaching ranks have the professional development that they need in order to be as effective as they can possibly be in a virtual platform. I think it's also going to be critical to examine how do you deploy social emotional support to your students and your faculty and staff when we have to be separated one from another, understanding the importance of that connectivity that we have to one another. There's been a lot of focus on broadband connectivity and Wi-Fi connections, and that's really important, and making sure that infrastructure in place. So what are the work that we're doing to ensure that those gaps are closed? That last mile of connectivity for our students will be critical, but also the connectivity from person to person, from heart to heart. How do we make sure that we remain connected, although we may be distant from one another, and providing the support for students and teachers and administrators while we have to be separate in order to be safe. So those are going to be really important things for us to address, in addition to learning gaps, whether or not we're going to get another waiver for federal accountability assessments. How are our classroom spaces and schools set up in order for us to appropriately social distance if we have to do those things? So what our physical infrastructure looks like to be able to provide that as well. And so there are a myriad of challenges, or a myriad of things that are on the radar that we're constantly thinking about, running multiple scenarios of split schedules. And what does that look like? How long does a typical bus route going to take if we have to run a split bus route? What are class sizes going to look like? What buildings are we going to use? Do we keep our high school students home and use our high schools for our elementary and middle school students so that we can spread them out more and use the virtual platform just for high school students, since they are more accustomed to that and a little bit farther along? So there are a lot of scenarios that we're looking at.
Yeah, there certainly are. So I wanted to tackle this next topic that I know you're incredibly passionate about. In fact, we met through some mutual friends because we were collaborating on an equity-related project. Future Ready Schools and equity is so core to our work: equity and opportunity, equity and access. I know from everything you put out socially, the work that you do, and just interacting with you the times that I've had, you are a staunch advocate for equity. All means all. And talk to us a bit about, what advice do you have for school and district leaders? One of the things around COVID it is, it certainly, I would say it didn't create equity issues. It really exposed and amplified equity issues that have always existed. Talk
Mhm.
to us about how do we make sure we always have an equity lens in all of our work and not just in the midst of a pandemic, because I know that's the way you lead.
Yeah, I think one a good start is developing an equity policy and institute and implementing an equity policy in your district. I think every school district should have an equity policy. And we can talk a little deeper about that because there's been a lot of conversations around equity over the last several weeks, the last month or so. But now, with as times have unfolded since then, whether or not we really need to be looking at anti-racism policies as well. But I think it's important for someone or the organization to have a lens and something in place where you are constantly looking at your practices. Because the challenge is not necessarily is making sure the equity is in place, but it's really about eradicating the barriers or the systemic practices, the institutional practices that create the systems of inequity. How do we remove those from the schools and from our schools and from our classrooms? What are the barriers that are in place? Looking at those barriers and then tearing those barriers down so that all can have access. And I think that's like the biggest steps you can take is really working to remove those barriers that create the inequitable conditions.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's talk about courageous leadership. It's having those uncomfortable conversations, looking at those systems and structures that have been in place as long as we've known them, and questioning
Yeah.
and saying who benefits from those and who doesn't benefit from those, and which do we just need to completely eradicate, to use the word that you use there. Couldn't agree more. So let me ask you this: a couple final questions for you. The humanistic side, the people side of our work. We are in the people business. How do we make sure in all the decisions? I mean, you were just rattling off major decisions that have to really come into play in the next couple of weeks, looking towards next school year. But how do we not lose sight of the people side of things, the humanistic, that side of things? How do we make sure the people side of things just stays front and center in all our decision making?
Yeah, I think making sure that we stay focused on people is as simple as seeing the individuals as seeing them for who they are, the importance of who they are. And so how do I best explain that? Here we talk about self-actualization and the notion that every person is innately born with the desire to be the best versions of themselves. What are we doing to put you in a position to be the best version of yourself? That guides the work that we do. To be mission focused, not accountability focused, not checking box focused. A lot of times we spend in education, we have been confused and pushed into this direction where we only really look at achievement, and that's the measure of our success. But I believe that educators in the future are going to have to be more mission driven. What is the mission of your school district, and focus on achieving that mission? In our school district, our mission is for our students to be global citizens prepared to lead and excel in their chosen pathways. So how am I making my students global citizens and putting them in a position where they can lead and achieve in their chosen pathways? That's how we stay student focused, is stay mission driven.
Yeah, good stuff. So let me ask you one final question. I know we're short on time. Here you are leading the way, large school district, moving forward. We've got so much fear. We've got so many uncertainties on the outside of our walls. What advice do you have for your superintendent colleagues, or even for principals or teachers in classrooms that are going to start a new school year? What's one piece of advice you'd give them right now?
For superintendents and principals starting the school year, I guess the best advice I can give them is really to take a moment and pause, and to remind themselves of why they decided or why they were called into this work. Because I only think that the most effective principals, the most effective teachers, and the most effective superintendents and leaders are going to be the ones who are going to be willing to now get in the soil and till the soil as we kind of forge in this new way of educating, providing educational experiences for our students. Look to the future. Don't look to the past. look to see how we're going to be able to improve education as we move forward. We have a unique opportunity to just blow up the way that the system has been working and build and create a new system that is best for all students.
That's Baron Davis, everybody. I can't say it any better than that. That's for sure. So thank you for your time today, my friend. Thanks for investing it, and keep leading the way.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, brother.